people have been making music one way or another for a long time. Music, love, and war have been with mankind since the beginning. Like love, music can deeply affect human emotion. Like war, making music has changed over the years by advances in technology. The most recent upheaval in music has been caused by synthesizers. In the context of hundreds of years of musical instrument making, synthesizers have exploded onto the musical landscape. There are now at least 1,000 different machines capable of mimicking natural musical instruments. There'll be another 1,000 tomorrow. Playing music electronically began with oscillators. You can make your own oscillator with a microphone and an amplifier. The pitch of the note you create depends on the size of the room and the distance between the microphone and the speaker. The distance causes a small time delay that makes the feedback work. The length of time delay controls the pitch. An electronic oscillator is just an amplifier with its output fed back to its input. And electronic components provide the time delay. This is the purest form of electronic vibration, the sine wave. It looks nice and it sounds pure and it has a whole set of mathematics to describe it. The sine wave is created by the same laws as the natural swing of a pendulum. An instrument like a flute provides an oscillation a lot like a sine wave. The length of air in the flute controls the period of oscillation of the note, and by closing holes along its length, the flutist can change the pitch. A trumpet also uses a variable length column of air to control its pitch, but there's an added dimension to the sound. The air in a trumpet is set to vibrating by this. That causes the air column to vibrate not like a sine wave. There's a mathematical principle that says that any complicated repeating pattern like this can be broken down into individual sine waves. You can prove this to yourself with a piece of graph paper and a pencil. Start with a sine wave. Then you add some harmonics. Those are sine waves at 1, 2, 3, 4 times the frequency and so on. You might just start with a fundamental and the first harmonic, just to play around with the idea. If you add up all the points and then plot them again, this repeating waveform results. If you take the sum of 10 or so harmonics, a square wave results. Square waves are very rich in harmonics. The relative harmonic content is one of the factors that makes a flute different from a piano, even though they're playing the same pitch. In electronics, it's simple to create square waves from sine wave fundamentals. You just amplify them real big and take a slice out of the center. Voila! Instant harmonics. Filtering can change the relative content of harmonics for different tonal qualities. The science of this is easy to predict, but the results sound mathematical. The generation of 1960s and 70s synthesizers used that method. The 80s brought FM synthesis. FM stands for frequency modulation. The wave from one oscillator is used to instantaneously change the frequency of another. If the modulating oscillator operates slowly, an up and down sweep in pitch results. If the two oscillators are similar in frequency or even harmonically related, wild and wonderful vent wave shapes are the result. People who understand the math of many different oscillators modulating each other usually have dark circles under their eyes and speak in undecipherable sentences. But the great thing about FM synthesis is that it can be created by ear. Furthermore, they've done away with the jungle of patch cords, and computer technology keeps track of what's connected to what and what the adjustments are. If you really eschew programming, you simply use the thousands of pre-programmed settings that come on floppy disks or plug-in packs. The pre-programmed settings are called voices, and they're labeled things like violin, piano, flute, and the like. By throwing a whole bag of electronics in a synthesizer, most of the other things that make a real-world instrument unique can be synthesized too. One of the most basic parameters of an instrument is attack, sustain, decay, and release. That's a fancy talk name for what happens when an instrument is struck, plucked, bowed, or blowed. A piano exhibits all four characteristics. A sharp attack as the hammer struck, a slightly quieter sustained period, and a gradual decay in volume, and then an abrupt stop as the key is released. All synthesizers had to simulate this, but the 80s generation could do it dynamically. The keyboard not only transmits what key's being pressed, but how fast it was pressed. The key velocity translates to how hard the note was struck. The key velocity doesn't have to control the volume. Some of the prettiest sounding synthesizer voices use the velocity to control the harmonic content. As well, there's a function called keyboard scaling. That allows the instruments to have its characteristics change depending on the note that's selected. One of the most obvious uses of this is to have the instrument go slightly out of tune at the ends of its range, like a lot of real instruments do. The usual control for a synthesizer is by an organ-style keyboard. This presents a problem in the case of synthesizing something like a violin. A violinist can bend the pitch of a note with a tiny roll of the finger and can also control the dynamics and even the harmonic content with the bow action. Most modern synthesizers add a feature to the keyboard called aftertouch. Pressure transducers under the keys tell how hard they're being pushed while they're being held. As well, a pitch bender is standard equipment at the left side of the keys. The pitch bender can be set to provide everything from special effects to the subtle roll of a finger. And the aftertouch can control the other dynamics of the sound. This synthesizer even allows me to play the violin badly. Although, you'll be glad to know that I can play the violin badly without a synthesizer. If your mind is boggling at the amount of circuitry that can be crammed into a keyboard, you have to multiply that boggling by 16. This machine's polyphonic. It can do all of this stuff with 16 notes at once. Now, why would you need 16 notes if you only have 10 fingers? Some synths have less polyphony and some have more. Smaller units